Hey everyone, it's Ken Rakowski. Welcome to Metal Mentoring. Every single week, we bring an incredible speaker that shares their knowledge, their wisdom. We hang out with them, ask them questions. It's open forum, anything you want. Make sure you're here every single week. James, I have been seeing you pop up everywhere. You have a movie coming out. You only could see it in about 5 different states. You were just on Freakonomics, which was pretty awesome. You are literally everywhere. James, it's great to have you here with us again. Good to see you.
Ken, thanks so much for inviting me. This is such a great group you've organized.
It's an amazing group, right? First, it's a group of dudes, right? How many times do you see a men's group and it's actually socially accepted? Pretty rare.
It's funny you say that because just as a little bit of a tangent, I was watching this show last night and there was a sitcom and there was a bunch of women having girls' night out at a restaurant, and they were all like putting, laughing and putting like whipped cream in their mouth, and the waiter was, licking the whipped cream out. And I was just thinking to myself that this does not happen with guys. Like I wouldn't go out with like my guy friends and we'd all just put whipped cream in our mouths and just be laughing and giggling. Nothing against what they're doing. It's just a different experience.
Hey, can I ask a favor just because it looks like you're about to order us some fries with that headset on? Either make the microphone lower or where do you want to put it? You want to do it there? Okay, got it. How many books you got?
I just counted, actually. It was 3 more than I thought. It was 25.
25 books.
Yeah.
And every time you write a book, are you writing a book because you need to get a book out of you? Does it serve as a purpose because you got ideas popping up, or do you have like a quota in your mind?
No, it's like every time I write a book, I swear to myself, I am never, ever going to write a book again. And just something bubbles up and I just have to get this book out. And they haven't all been, I've written about a variety of topics. I've written a children's book. I've written fiction. I've written books about finance. I've written self-help / memoir. And my next book, I've done about half traditionally published with publishers and half self-published. My most successful books actually were self-published, but my next book, which is coming out next March, is traditionally published with HarperCollins.
That's interesting. Why would your self-published do so much better than going with a traditional publisher?
Well, because I think there's a lot of myths about what traditional publishers provide. And when you self-publish a book, think about what you're in control of. You're in control of the release date. You're 100% in control of the marketing. You're in control of pricing. So for instance, I could do a deal with a big email list and offer, like, let's say 5 extra hidden chapters that you'll get. But, now the book's going to cost a few more dollars. I could up the price on Amazon while that offer is happening so that there's a huge incentive for the people reading about it for the first time on the email list. They'll check on Amazon. They'll see they've got a deal on the email list. And so there's lots of ways I can be in charge of it's almost like I'm running my own little publishing company. So, Choose Yourself, my best-selling book, sold over 1 million copies, but a lot of it's because I was able to do these marketing deals early on, and I had a lot more control over pricing and shipping, and I convinced Amazon to make a hardcover. I have total control over the audiobook. So, and then I have control over foreign rights too. So I sell the foreign rights in like 20 countries, but I'm in control of it.
So there's one guy in our group, his name is Shaheen Shen. So Shaheen, by the time he was 21, he was doing about $400 million a year with his business. 400 million, okay? He created the vaporizer, he created herbal ecstasy, and now he's got the limitless pill. Just a crazy, amazing guy. And he says anything moving forward in the future is any business he creates, he wants to do it with somebody that already has a platform. And a platform could be like Amazon. Amazon's a platform, an existing infrastructure that allows something to happen, or a clearing or publishing house. Are you doing this deal with HarperCollins is because they have a platform? Because you could go back to Amazon because they have a very significant platform also.
Sure.
Again, why?
So HarperCollins is coming to me because I have a platform. So, again, what does a publisher actually offer? They offer an advance, but in general, particularly if you're a first-time author or whatever, advances have been gradually going down in the industry. And they claim they offer a platform, an ability to get your book into bookstores. But right now, with this economic lockdown, bookstores are closed. So they don't really have that platform anymore. And they claim they have marketing, reach. But if you have your own carefully built up platform, their marketing is nothing. They basically ask you what your the reason now publishers go to authors is because they're only picking authors who already have pre-existing platforms, and then they try to say, look, we'll get you into bookstores, you'll get this advance. But because I wanted to experiment, it's been about 5 or 6 books, maybe it's been like about 10 books since I've traditionally published. So I wanted to experiment and go back with the traditional publisher. So there was an auction for the book, so I got a nice advance.
Got it.
And I wanted to work with an editor I've worked with 10 years ago. She did a great job. And now we'll see what else they offer. I don't think they really offer that much else in terms of marketing. Right? I would never go into this thinking that they're going to do the marketing for me.
Makes sense.
I'm doing the marketing.
Let's go to Rob Angel. Rob, who created Pictionary, is with us right now. Rob just came out with his book. Hey, Rob.
And I've been reading it. Great book, Rob.
Hey, Rob, look at that.
And Rob, I always mean to contact you. We got to get you on the podcast. The book is great. I love Pictionary. We got to do this.
Absolutely.
Rob, what route did you go?
I self-published.
You self-published.
Yeah.
And what hurdles are you going after or facing right now?
Well, marketing is real tough right now. All the news is all about COVID and everything else. So it's hard to get noticed and sell a lot of books. But it doesn't mean you can't get out there. But it's a different deal.
Guys, I believe that's a fallacy. I mean, I'm the guy that understands radio probably better than anyone. Not sure if you know this, James. My show was number 9 in the country for a few years. So I had about 3.5 million listeners every single day. Tier 2 markets, guys, Tier 2, they're craving for content. Radio needs content. So, Rob, either it's a great PR person that can get you on there or and I can show you how to use Twitter to literally go after every talk show host you could ever imagine that would dream of having you on, okay? And it's totally doable. And I'm just going to tell you, like my 2-hour show, if somebody came to me with 15 minutes of content, it's like a godsend going, thank God you're there. So, Rob, let's talk later and let me help you out, okay?
I agree with that. But also I would say the longer form the conversation, like Ken, you just mentioned a 15-minute conversation. Typically what a book publicist will do or what a marketing firm will do is get you on local morning shows, for instance, like Good Day New York or whatever, Good Day St. Louis. And those are useless. Like
yes.
Nobody listens. They're only 3 minutes. I'm sure 15 minutes on a quality radio show.
Well, the way I would do it, James, is I would actually make somebody like a Rob a regular occurring individual. And the 15 minutes, you and I could have a long dialogue on this. I've actually created a group that have become regulars on radio shows around the world. And there's a way of doing that because once you're the expert, they will call you on a regular basis and use you as a reference. And Rob's that guy.
Right. Like, so for instance, for Rob and Rob, I apologize we didn't do it sooner while your book was in full release mode, but since you self-published, that's okay. There's different ways around that. But Rob's best route is an extension of what you just said, which is the podcast tour has replaced the book tour. So imagine someone goes on Joe Rogan as like the ideal, then the book's an automatic bestseller. But then there are podcasts like mine where obviously I'm, let's say a tier below Joe Rogan's, but I have a huge book buying audience because I've had so many authors on. My entire audience is our book buyers. Joe's, maybe only a small percentage of his audience are book buyers. But with Rob, let's say, Rob's going to be a guest. With Rob, I would do 2 things. One is have an extensive conversation about his background and the book and Pictionary and so on. But also, I want to make a game. And my listeners, we're in this wide open world right now. The people think in terms of, is the economy going up? Is the economy going down? That's the wrong way to think. Right now, the world's turned upside down. And so there's an extra $1 trillion floating around in stimulus. And now we just have to reach out and grab it. So a lot of people are thinking, what creative things I can do while I'm sitting here at home. And you know what? Starting a game is one of them. So I would bring on Rob and say, okay, we talk about Pictionary, we do all that. And then I say to Rob, I want to make from scratch I want to make a version of Cards Against Humanity, but I want to call it Trump Against Humanity or whatever. And then we walk through and establish Rob as the expert, and boom, everyone buys the book. That's how I would structure it.
Rob, I just want people to know that the book's out there. People want to find it. Where do they go? Come on, Rob.
RobAngel.com, Amazon, anywhere you can. Find it on my website, RobAngel.com.
That's where you go. And by the way, Rob, the way I would do is I would have you become the game master on all these different radio shows. Because morning drive shows, breakfast shows, they call them, in different parts, you can literally say, hey, today's game is, and you would introduce it to get your book. We'll talk about it. I want to go to Robbie Richmond. Robbie, who wrote the book called Culture Blueprint. That's it, right?
Yep, Culture Blueprint.
And did you self-publish?
Yeah, I did.
What did you do wrong?
Oh, jeez. Oh, my gosh, so much. That I really didn't have a marketing plan, that I relied on the word of mouth. And I mean, I got like a lot of 5-star reviews and everything, but I really didn't, leverage a launch.
Leverage a launch. By the way, James, he helped create the culture at Zappos. Pretty big deal.
Right. So you would think you would be able to take that experience and leverage that into a marketing event combined with the book. But to be fair, there's so much competition out there for content and for eyeballs. You kind of have to do something, outrageous a little bit to make your book launch an event. Mm-hmm. So for instance, when, and I've tried to do this with all my books, but like when Choose Yourself came out, a month before I released it, this is in 2013, I built an online bookstore, but it would only accept Bitcoin as payment. So then I advertised myself as being the best-selling author in world history for Bitcoin. And I got on CNBC with that. And they even asked me, did you just do this as like a marketing, gimmick? And I said, well, I'm on national TV right now, so you tell me if it worked or not. And so what? And then I ran for Congress. And then I dropped out of running for Congress, but I had a whole story about why I dropped out. And that went along with the Choose Yourself idea. And then I did a few other things that were very interesting and unique. So you kind of have to start planning about 6 months in advance. What is going to be like the insane or interesting out of the box thing that you do that kind of is timed right with the release of your book? And it takes about 6 months from planning to execution to get that right.
So you should do Choose Yourself, the movie. They can only buy it with BitConnect. BitConnect.
Well, this is just a fun thing. So some other production company, they've done a whole bunch of documentaries. They approached me a couple years ago, wanted to do a documentary about the book Choose Yourself. So they did it. It's an 8-episode series, but then they kind of lost track of their producer. They didn't know what to do with it. So I said 2 things. One is, let's just simply release it on Amazon like a TV series. So when you search on Amazon, it'll look like any other. People don't know you can simply upload a TV series to Amazon. You could essentially self-publish a TV series. So it will look like any other major produced TV series from the point of view of the consumer. The other thing is, this is fascinating. So very few movie theaters in the country are open right now. Yeah. So normally to be the top 10 movie in the box office for a weekend, you got to be an Avengers movie or Hunger Games, and you have to sell $5 million worth of tickets minimum to be in number 10. Last weekend, you know what you needed to be in the top 10, number 10? You needed to sell $90 worth of tickets.
That's it. You could buy your own tickets.
So I found a chain that's in, Florida, California, Texas, Georgia, and a few other states. And I'm releasing on Saturday 2 episodes of this docuseries. And I'll trivially be in the top 10 for movies in the country and the box office. So that's an insane event.
By the way, just to let you know, the number 1 movie this week is The Relic. It was $192,000. Okay, that's what it made, and it was with drive-ins. Okay, it was with drive-ins. Last year at this time, do you know what the number 1 movie was?
No.
Spider-Man, $200 million.
Yeah.
So it's like the best time to launch a movie is right now.
So the thing is, like, I don't even care that it's in the movie theaters. What I do care about, which is the fun part, which is writing the story about it afterwards.
Yeah.
Because it's an unusual story, and I'll get that story everywhere. And that's the perfect kind of choose yourself story. I want to have, by the way, when you're in the top 10 in the box office, anyway, you're an Oscar contender automatically. So, you know, boom, it's such a weird story that that's publicity. So you always want to come up with kind of weird twists or on normal things. And
I got bad news for you, buddy. If you want to make it to number 5, you're going to have to probably spend about $10,000 in tickets.
I know. So I'm only going for number 10.
Which is
I'm only
about
gonna,
$400.
I'm going to take my family to the movies, and that's going to put me in the top 10 of the box office for the entire country. They need to invite maybe 3 friends.
We got tons of stuff to talk about. You want to say something, put inside the chat. I'll unmute you. Let's hang out. Let's talk. And I'm so happy. You should be a metal member. I'm just saying, you are the perfect guy.
I want to be. How do I be a metal member?
We'll make it happen. And by the way, the one at 5 o'clock, which is 8 o'clock your time, we have all the billionaires that come on, right? And they all bitch and tell us what stocks to buy. The 3 of them, they go, man, I like that James guy, just to let you know. So there's a club they want to get you into.
All right, great.
All right, let's go after the obvious. And that is, what makes you so unique?
Well, I mean, everybody on this board here is unique. So I don't know if I'm different in that way from anyone else, but I would say, you know, there was a point. I started my first business. I had no idea what I was doing. I had no idea that there were actual skills to business other than sales and execution. So which obviously are very important skills in business, but there are many, many other skills. And I had no clue what I was doing. And I sold that first business. This is in the 90s. And I almost, because I had no skills in business, I almost immediately went broke. I went from tens of millions to zero because I was just an idiot. And I lost my home, lost family, lost everything. I was just dead broke at the end of this a very short period. And then I managed somehow to do this exact same process 3 more times. So 4 times in all, where I made a lot of money. I thought I was done. Oh, I'm even done improving as a human. I did it. I could just like squander my life now. And I would just immediately go to zero. And it kind of like through this really painful trial and error, like where I would go from like these super highs in the business world and in my positive confidence and so on to practical suicidal thoughts, depression, losing everything. And I kind of through trial and error figured out for myself, at least not for anybody else, but for myself, what I was doing wrong and how I could kind of improve as a human being so this doesn't happen again. And part of that is, you know, the obvious things like, you know, avoiding, you know, being around toxic people, blah, 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 all that stuff. But then what was really important to me and what I found resonated with people is that there was this one point in 2002 where I was depressed. I was going through the whole thing. And I wandered into this restaurant supply store and I bought a box of 100 waiters pads. And I just liked how they looked and I liked the feel of it. And then the next day I started writing down ideas. You can't really write a book on a waiter's pad. You could just write bullet pointed lists. So I just would write these lists of ideas. And after a few weeks, I noticed I was coming out of this depression somehow. And I was getting really excited about the ideas I was writing down. And what I realized is that ideas are like a muscle. Like some people just sit around waiting for inspiration, but muscles atrophy. So if you don't use your legs for 3 or 4 weeks, let's say you're in the hospital or whatever, you're in bed for 3 weeks, you actually need physical therapy to walk again. That's how fast the leg muscles atrophy. And so the idea muscle's the same way. And as I'm sure everyone on this board knows. And I would say, you know, a good 300 million people in this country have atrophied idea muscles. So just writing down 10 stupid bad ideas a day, I exercised that idea muscle and I came up with, you know, all sorts of other ways to come up with ideas. Like I became really good at like just coming up with ideas. Again, most of the time, bad ideas. You're coming up with so many ideas. 99% of them have to be awful ideas. But the point is just as exercise. And I still do it to this day, and a lot more consistently
I like that.
in the past few years than I was doing before. But like every day now, first thing I do is I read a little bit, and then I always, it's the only practically religious thing I stick to every single day.
Write down ideas. Well, writing down ideas. You're religious
writing down
about
ideas
that.
every day.
Do you have a quota in your mind? How many a day?
10 a day.
10 a day.
And 10 is important because the first 7 are usually easy. And then it's like if you do push-ups, like let's say you're used to doing 100 push-ups a day. Okay. So maybe the first 70 is easy. And then that final 30, you're like, oh, I can't wait till this is over. I can't wait till this is over. So starting around idea number 7, I feel my brain starting to sweat. Like I'm trying to come up with ideas.
Do you have that idea journal near you?
I don't. It's downstairs, but I could tell you any of my ideas.
Yeah, give us an idea. What kind of ideas would you throw out? Like what?
All right. So this is an example. I can guarantee you almost all these ideas are bad, but this was today's list. So by the way, people always ask me, do I keep track of them? Do I look back at them? I don't. The whole point is just the exercise. So that's why I remember today's. I'd have a harder time remembering other days. But I read an article this morning how people are going on first dates now on Zoom because of the lockdown. And so I started thinking, well, if I were Zoom, what features could I add to the product that would specifically, the use case would be to make dates better. So I had one feature. I wish I had it on me.
No, so you're saying not just total brand new something. They're features or additions. So
or sometimes it's combinations. So I call that idea sex, where I take ideas from one area. Well, this would be sort of an example. I could take an idea from combine what would video conferencing combined with dating really look like if I wanted to optimize it for the user. And now an idea list like that, I would usually take it, and if I thought they were good ideas, I would send it to the company. So because of that, I have visited Google, Amazon, Facebook, LinkedIn, Quora, Twitter, because I've written down ideas and sent to them. Here's how I would improve self-publishing at Amazon. Here's how I would improve Quora. Here's how I would improve Twitter.
Do you know who you sound like? Let me tell you who you sound like. Eric Oberholzer. Can you unmute yourself? Eric, who has a very successful chain of restaurants that he created called Tender Greens. And he's worked at the Orient. Eric, it sounds like being a chef, doesn't it?
It does. It's just creative flow always.
It just constantly. So as a chef, do you, in your mind, say, I have to come up with so many new recipes? Do you have like a quota in your mind, or do you just go with what's fixed?
I guess as I was listening to this, one, I'm impressed with how many books you've published. I suppose I search more for points of inspiration from which then to launch ideas, for my own benefit, and then the benefit of what I'm passionate about. And then, of course, I do a lot of problem solving on the freeway when I'm in traffic. I go through exercises of urban redevelopment always.
You're not getting any good problem solving or ideas right now. There's no traffic.
That's why.
No, but you know what though is interesting about restaurants? So I had an idea list a couple months ago involving restaurants. And Eric, obviously, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm naive completely about this, but the definition of a restaurant now has changed. It used to be if I thought of a restaurant, I would think of tables and waiters and a hostess and a bartender and a kitchen. But now the definition of a restaurant now is just a menu. So I could rent space in a cloud kitchen. I can make 5 different menus, upload them all to Uber Eats and Grubhub. That's 5 different restaurants now that I have because nobody knows they're not just menus. And then after a week, I see which items do the best, which menus do the best.
Real-time
I'll get rid of the other
statistics is what you're saying. Real-time analytics.
Yeah, and it has nothing to do. It just has to do with the items on a restaurant now is a menu. It's not a physical location. And what's interesting is, I'm not a chef, obviously. So you come up with unique. I was trying to come up with a list of unique, menus. So for instance, I could have James's Big Cones, and so I would just sell massive ice cream cones.
You're coming out with? No.
Like it could that could be the next list. But like, imagine if, you know, my kids every day are looking for dessert. So I'll have one menu on Uber Eats. It's just massive cones. So like maybe the cone is like, you know, 20-inch cone, and there's vanilla, chocolate, strawberry, and that's it. And that's a restaurant. Or I could do, you know, sushi ritos. So I could just throw sushi in a burrito and have tuna, salmon, and beans in every burrito. And then I could see if that menu works. I could just be crazy ideas, and it doesn't cost me anything because I don't have to start a whole restaurant, a traditional restaurant.
What's your thought about that, Eric?
Well, it sounds like you've invested in cloud kitchens.
No, I haven't.
I think the cloud or ghost kitchen is interesting. It's an attempt to meet people where they're at, which is on their phone. I'm not a fan, and I would push back a little bit and say that it's a food delivery system. It's not a restaurant. I think you need to create a restaurant experience. You have to create an experience that affords people with community, a sense of care, gathering.
Even now, Eric, when we're in this quarantine type environment?
Well, things are complicated now, but I think there's still demand to gather. For us to, live in isolation and, dial up for food delivery is, Eric,
let me challenge you on something. Let me just challenge you on something. Kirkland.
Go ahead. Yeah.
Look what Kirkland in Costco has done.
Mm-hmm.
They have basically said, hey, we're just going to make something now that look like everybody else, and we're going to sell it to you at a lower price. That's what kind of James is saying.
Well, sure. It's, they private label and what, Uber just bought Postmates this week for, I don't know, $2.9 billion.
Yeah.
Postmates, you know that?
$2.6 billion.
Yeah. So, certainly the world's going this direction. As a chef and as an advocate for better food systems, I worry that the phone in the app has become it has taken place of the car, and Postmates and Uber Eats is the drive-through, and we're more and more disconnected with one another, with where our food comes from, the experience of food, the ritual of food, and where that has gotten us over the last 60 or 70 years is fatter, sicker, mm-hmm. and more reliant on just a few nutrient-thin ingredients.
Eric, Eric, let's do a whole section on this another time, but I've got to know, what is behind you? What is that structure?
This is the Reading viaduct. It's the High Line of Philadelphia, essentially.
And that's where you do your Zoom calls now? Is that your spot?
Yeah, I have this little urban garden where we have a little floral shop here. I'll give you a little quick tour. I've got some chickens, and
nice.
So we're in the middle of what is similar to Wynwood in Miami or downtown LA, the Arts District.
Got it. Good to have you here, Eric. Love seeing you here. So Eric, you just heard that. He's worried because he's in a structure that has done very well for him in the past, right? Very well being a dining experience. Right. You're talking not about a dining experience at all. You're talking about a convenience experience and a safe experience because you're not worrying about COVID.
Right. So Eric, by the way, I 100% agree with you. I own a bar / comedy club, so I'm very familiar with the idea of how creating an experience and an environment for people is so much more valuable than just watching comedy, for instance, on YouTube. So I totally hear what you're saying. I was just giving an example of this is how I construct an idea list. I'm not saying it's good ideas. I just told you about James's big cones. So it's not like I'm trying to come up with like the biggest innovation in food.
I like the sushi ritos.
The sushi burritos, look, anytime you combine two cuisines or anytime you take one item and make it ludicrous, that's not good for a restaurant, but it's good for a menu. And so that list of that day was just 10 menus. I'm not saying it's good. I'm not saying it's bad. Philosophically, I'm 100% where you are. Again, as a not just a bar owner, but a comedy club owner, it's all about the experience. There's no other way to deliver that. And if someone told me, no, I can deliver comedy this way, I would say, well, good luck. But
yeah, two things there. Sushi Rito is a concept very successful out of San Francisco.
Oh,
so it is.
I did not know that.
Yeah, they started maybe 7 or 8 years ago and did very well. Came to New York and failed, but did well in San Francisco, and there are a bunch of spin-offs. I sit on some advisory boards of ghost kitchens, so I'm mindful of the direction the world's going. But I appreciate your.
I think the two of you need to come together.
But again, I am not like Eric. You first mentioned that I must be invested in cloud kitchens. I'm not. This really was what I was describing here. This is just I don't use most of the ideas. They're just there as exercise. Yeah. I have had idealists turn into entire businesses that have done very well. This is certainly not one of them. It's just an example of, what I was thinking about that day and coming up with ideas.
They're great. And we're going to move on. Eric, thank you so much. I actually want to go with, I normally go in order, but I like what Jason initially said. Jason Gills, I want to talk real quick, Jason. You said about depression, because James, you brought up depression, a depressionary state. I think a lot of us entrepreneurs go through it on a regular basis at times because we don't have that adrenaline going. Jason, what's your quote on what you said about depression? And then why don't you ask your question? Go for it, Jason.
Anger without enthusiasm.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good description. I mean, and I think, look, there's obviously clinical depression, which has other sources, but I was more in the anger without enthusiasm camp. And what this process did for me at different stages of my life was it kind of allowed me to force myself into action. Because every now and then I'll come up with an idea that I think I can act on, and some of them work and some of them don't. And so what it led to was, so there's the ideation process, which is coming up with these ideas. And then I have developed, again, just for myself, but this idea of how do you experiment with an idea? So an experiment is something that has basically almost no downside and then potential huge upside. And in worst case, you learn. So there's no such thing as failure with an experiment. You either have huge upside, like maybe a business is created, or you learn, oh, this is why this business won't work. I just learned with Eric just now. And I had no downside at all. Even if I were to set up rent space in hypothetically, when I made this list, if I was to rent space in one of these commissary kitchens, this is very little downside, as opposed to going through the process of setting up a restaurant. And so I developed this process of experimenting on these ideas, and that's served me well because some things do turn into fairly big businesses. I mean, I remember a few years ago, there was the Eric Garner shooting. We're dealing with Black Lives Matter right now. So part of the idea process for me then was, is it possible to make a non-lethal device used by police that could improve law enforcement and reduce police brutality? Came up with an idea list. I had everything from like sonic guns, laser guns, whatever. And that idea list did ultimately result in a company that has since gone public and is right now being tested out by hundreds of police stations all over, or police agencies all over the world. And some things work out and some things don't.
I love it. Okay, so why don't you do this? Jason, what's your questions for James?
I didn't really have a question. I'm impressed. I'm a fan. When I saw the link, I wanted to jump on, and it's just really cool. It's really cool to see you on here, and I follow your work, and I wish I were more like you. It just
you got a cool job. Why don't you tell them what your gig is?
I have a cool job too, and my my impression, my summary of depression being anger without enthusiasm, and why I think you got yourself out of the rut is it boils down to faith. You believe that something would come. That this is what I think.
It's a great point.
Of just sitting there and writing these things for no reason and to no one and just to the universe. And I think that's how we get out of being stuck. My specialty is addiction medicine and helping people quit drugs and alcohol. And my heretical viewpoint is that it's a habit, and I think it's not a disease. And I think that depression, I'm not talking about some chemical issues or structural problems, but for the garden variety depression, it's a habit. And I've been in it, and I've had the habit of thinking that things are bad and they're going to stay bad and they're not going to get any better and I'm useless and I can't and so forth. And the act of faith is to take a step, is to commit to paper, is to reduce your thoughts to something tangible. It's to forge this fear into something that now is real and you can deal with it rather than just having it rummage around forever. And then success, you're talking about these ideas, and Jerry Seinfeld talks about not breaking the chain with joke writing. If you're in the habit of coming up with ideas, you get in the habit of coming up with ideas. It's very much like a muscle. If you're in the habit of doing anything, you just get better and better and better at it.
Thank you, Jason.
100%. That's completely it. From the first list to today's list. And again, most of the time, you can't just sit there and wait for inspiration to hit. You come up with ideas every day. You don't break the chain. And then if you feel like an idea, if you get that connection going and you feel an idea might be interesting, the next day I'll do a list of execution ideas. How can I take this idea I'm excited about, and what are the first 10 micro steps to execute? I never want to commit too much because the ideas could be bad. You never really know. But those first execution steps keep that excitement going. And now I'm always kind of cycling because I know ideas are going to be abundant. I'm always cycling through ideas. 99% of them are horrible, but I'll try a couple every now and then. And I'm always cycling to the next thing.
James, tell us about your personal life. Married, kids. What inspires you every day?
Well, so I married my wife in the end of December 31st, 2018. So it's a year and a half and a few days. And she had 3 kids. I have 2 kids. So now together we have 5 kids. They're all between the ages of 18 and 21. They're all great. And, I have podcasts, which I do all the time. I'm constantly having guests on my podcast. I'm writing every day. And then I'm working on ideas every day. So just every single day is kind of idea driven and and I should say experiment driven. So, that's basically it. And I try to write every day.
I like it. Hey guys, I just want to remind you this Saturday, we have the guy that created Make-A-Wish Foundation. We have the lady that started created Equinox, which I didn't know had 300 facilities around the United States now, which kind of blows my mind because they own SoulCycle. We have Dr. Amen. Dr. Daniel Amen studies the brain. He's 9 best-selling hits in the New York Times. You don't want to miss this Saturday. It's going to be a really good one. Let's go over to Brandon, who's matter of fact, he's got his movie too. He launched his movie. Was it this year you launched your movie, Brandon?
It was last year. By the way, James, your wedding date is my birthday date.
Oh, so funny.
And I'm looking forward to watching your series. You know Sean Vella, right?
I don't know Sean.
So you'll know when you see him. So Sean shot your series with you. He's darker complected, shorter guy. And
okay, yeah, no, I know him.
Yeah, so when he was shooting your series, it was around the same time we were shooting ours. So he would come back and we would do our shoot like the week after. And he was blown away about everything you said on camera. And he just his mind was blown. We'd have hour conversations about things he learned from you. But my question for you is as going on camera a lot, and we put 2 shows on Amazon. My question is, what were the aha moments you had when you were on set on camera? Because all these different ideas come to you. What were some things you learned about yourself when you were shooting that series?
That's a good question. I don't know. I was a little nervous because I didn't know. My gut instinct was who would be interested in this. So, but But I guess what happened was, I mean, we shot all over the place. We shot in New York City, in California, in England, in France. And I was surprised, even in England and France, how many people would come up to us and say to me, you know, oh, I read your book, or I watched your podcast, or I watched this or that. And, you know, and then they were able to get this on camera. And one thing I learned about myself was a little sad, is that they were talking to my daughter, and I didn't realize this till I watched the series. She says, oh, you know, he was always so, it was the classic, you know, he was always so depressed, or he was so busy. I wish I had spent more time with him when I was growing up. So that made me a little sad, but she, you know, she was with me on the trip to England and France. And, yeah, I don't know exactly what I learned. That's probably a good idea list. I don't know what I learned from the process of shooting it, because I was constantly nervous that nobody would be interested in this at all. This could be the most boring documentary ever shot. So we'll see.
Well, you get your lessons, share them with me. I want to hear them.
There you go.
Yeah, sure. And I think
go.
again, a lot of times people tell me, you don't share your ideas all the time, because people will steal the ideas, or they're worried people will steal their ideas. And my whole philosophy with all of this is you should share every idea, because most of them you're not going to do or execute.
Makes sense.
And sharing actually makes you more abundant with the ideas, because if anyone does steal, you could see how they do it and learn from that. And it's exciting. And believe me, I've had tons of ideas stolen from me, or some ideas that are stolen, which I then end up being a part of as an equity holder, and they blossom. Like this police device, for instance.
That's awesome.
So I'll just describe this police device. It shoots out a steel cable at the speed of sound. It wraps around you, and you're restrained. You can't fight out of it because it tightens, and it doesn't hurt.
Doesn't Wonder Woman have one of those?
Yeah, we basically modeled it, or when I was coming up with the ideas, we modeled it after a Batman device. And
awesome.
We get calls every day now that we've saved lives. And you know, we just announced a big deal with Indonesia, and you know, so sometimes these ideas thank you. And sometimes these ideas that are just random, they turn into, this is a $400 million company now. So wow. they get valuable.
I gotta share something with you. So, hey, William Quigley. William, what do you do regularly with Bitcoin? How much Bitcoin do you think you do on a monthly level?
What do you mean do?
You exchange on your platform.
It depends. 30 million, 40 million, I'd say.
30 to 40 million a month on Bitcoin. And then Tether does what?
What does Tether trade?
Yeah, what's Tether trade? You created Tether.
Yeah, well, I co-created it. Tether trades about $12 trillion annually.
So you're at that apex of doing things. You're at that very top notch. And it's very rare I ever hear from you, I like that guy. You basically don't like anyone, but you said you like James. What made you? I've never even seen you on these calls unless you're a guest on these calls. So for you to show up on one of these calls and it's not your show, why would you show up for James?
Because I think James has the ability to surprise, and I like surprises. You know, I like hearing things that I didn't expect to hear.
Wow, James.
I don't know him. I don't know James, but I've watched him on videos and whatnot over the years, and I've just seen he thinks in a novel way, and that's something I like.
You have to understand. I've known William for 20 plus years, and it's hard to get him to say even a thumbs up. I mean, it's almost like that's like the best is like this, and when he does that, it's like a rarity. He does this with you, so the ability to surprise.
Thank you so much.
Have you heard that before?
Have I heard it before?
Yeah, that you have the ability to surprise.
You know, sometimes I surprise, sometimes I disappoint. So, you know, it could be either one. I'll disappoint William right now. I one failed investment was Basecoin, which was going to be a competitor to Tether, and they just flaked out and it went to zero.
Did you see William?
Yeah. And you know, not to rub it in, but those guys really did some sleazy stuff.
Really? I don't know them personally, but look, I was disappointed. They seemed to just sort of combust well before they needed to. But to their credit, only, out of 100 or so investments, only twice has somebody returned the money I invested, and they did return the money I invested.
Wow.
So
They returned the money you invested minus 10%, right?
yes, you're right. You're right. They took
That's
their fee.
That's the part that annoyed me.
Okay.
Why is that?
Because they raised 130 million. 10% was 13 million. It was like 3 guys for 9 months. I don't know how you spend 13 million.
And then Scott Painter. Scott Painter spent 400 million.
If it was Scott Painter, it'd be a different thing. But I said to them, provide an accounting of how you spent the money. And you know what? Then it's okay. But they wouldn't do it. And then I'm like, why aren't you providing an accounting of what you spent? So that, James, is the only reason I thought it was kind of sleazy.
That's so interesting because of that, it's so rare to get any money back from a zero. I was just happy, and they probably knew that they can get away.
James, if you want to be a guest on William's show, which is on at 8:00 your time tonight, and then we could go around there because that's all we talk about is crypto and fintech. So why don't you join us on that one, and we could bitch and moan there. What do you think?
Well, unfortunately, I have to.
Every
any
Thursday.
other day, I would be good, but I just agreed to go on a podcast at 8:00.
Every Thursday. It's every
Thursday. Then that's great. Yeah, I'll come back next. I'll put it in my calendar right now. I'll come back next.
That's William's
Thursday.
show. But William thinks you're awesome, which is a rarity. Let's go over to CK. CK, you got the mic. What is your question for James? CK.
Yeah, James. First of all, being a longtime fan for reasons because you're so consistent with your creative throughput and you speak your truth in such a raw way. So 2 questions for you, 2-part questions, if you don't mind. When you write your books, 25 books, who are you speaking to? Are you speaking to the younger version of you? So then that way it's very clear about who's going to resonate with it. So that's the first question. The second question is, you had mentioned, I wonder if anyone's going to be interested in this. There's that every single creator, I don't care who you are, there's that internal resistance, right? Before you do anything. But again, you've been so consistent at doing shows and podcasts and coming up with ideas. How are you overcoming this internal resistance?
Well, okay, so it's 2 good questions. And I've heard authors talk about, oh, I'm writing for a single individual, or I'm writing for a certain audience or demographic. I always wonder about that. I never think about anybody when I am writing. I want to very technically write a good story. So it doesn't matter if I'm writing about, top 10 reasons one should own Tether, for instance, or, writing a nonfiction article or a fiction article or whatever. I'm always thinking in terms of how can I construct a very good story, and a very good story has lots of different components ranging from language to the structure of the story to the mythology of how people consume stories. So I'm just thinking very much of the technical skills needed to communicate the story I'm trying to tell. And I guess that's why I think my own story by itself would never be interesting, because I know for writing it's this enormous skill to kind of communicate something so that people will be interested in it. And storytelling is right now we're entering this period where degrees and credentials don't really matter. So the only thing that matters is what are your hard skills and what are your soft skills. And hard skill might be technical in some way. Soft skills are storytelling. How good are you at telling a story? And so whenever I do something like, let's say, a podcast or write or whatever, I'm always trying to figure out what is the DNA of the story here and how can I communicate it. And so then in order to do that, I study other storytellers. Like, for instance, for the past 6 years, I wanted to experiment 6 years ago, and I dipped my feet into stand-up comedy, and I got obsessed. Everybody told me, you're an idiot. Like, there's no way you're going to do anything with this, and you might as well keep focusing on, writing books or building businesses or whatever. But instead, I would spend about, probably for the past 5 years until this lockdown, a good 20 to 30 hours a week just focused on stand-up comedy. In fact, the week before the lockdown, I toured all over the Netherlands and, performing at a bunch of different comedy clubs. Then I came back to the U.S. just in time, and then the lockdown was the next day. But, a lot of that is, comedy is about taking these almost boring moments and enhancing them so much and so absurdly that tension is created, and then the tension is broken, and people laugh. And so it's all about kind of enhancing these everyday experiences and making them a story that has value in some way, whether it imparts a lesson or whether it makes people laugh or whether it makes people scared or whether it sells a product, and so on. So even these idealists, whenever I come up with something that I think, okay, well, this is a good idea, I'm going to maybe experiment with making this into a product, I'm always thinking, what's the underlying story of how I'm going to make the product, how I'm going to sell it.
James, it's important. It sounds like your audience is you. You need to write for yourself.
Yeah. Although if I'm making a product, I do have to think of what problems it's solving, but most of the time I'm solving a problem for myself. So for instance, for the podcasters out there, and Zoom is not a very good product for a podcast. And so I know if I were to create video conferencing software that I would use as a podcaster, it's probably going to be the best product out there. Now, if I was an event host, by the way, I learned when I was on the Metal event before, that was honestly the biggest Zoom event I had ever been on. And I realized there's all sorts of problems, which you all have realized probably by now. There's all sorts of problems with the chat on
oh yeah, it's horrible.
Zoom. It's horrible. And there's problems with connectivity, with the audio is not as high quality.
This is a huge opportunity to develop a product that's better than Zoom.
Yeah, and the thing is, Zoom's not a competitor because they already have 600 million users. They're dealing with just absorbing all those users. Zoom didn't realize that there was going to be, during this period, I've been to operas on Zoom. Zoom didn't realize that these things would happen. Zoom didn't realize that there would be dating on Zoom. Zoom didn't realize that every podcast in the world would move to Zoom or better. Zoom has serious problems with podcasting. So, this is inning zero in the video conferencing space, even though Zoom's worth $75 billion. So, that's why I make idea lists for Zoom plus dating, Zoom plus weddings, Zoom plus podcasts. And some of those ideas, you never know, could come to fruition. But again, I think I don't, by itself, nothing is a story. You kind of have to have some storytelling skill to bring something to life in a way that is interesting as a story. And,
right.
That's what I try to do. And you're right. The audience is myself. But if I'm thinking, for instance, of how do I give a device to police officers that won't kill people, I have to think of their stories. So I guess in that case, I'm thinking of the policeman's story. No police officer wakes up and says, I can't wait to kill somebody today. So you have to think, well, how do I make their story better? So that when they come home at night and they could tell a story that's a good story, how they didn't kill somebody, but they saved a life, or they restrained someone without hurting them, and so on.
All right, let's do another quick question. Ian, the mic is yours. What's your question for James?
Hey, James, this is Ian. How are you, buddy?
Hey, Ian.
Well, before I ask my question, I just wanted to say thank you for getting me through the long drives when I was traveling around the country. I would listen to your podcast for hours on end. Thank you for that.
You're welcome.
So my question would be, when you think about a successful person, what's the first name that comes to mind with all the people you've interviewed?
It's all of them. I mean, they're all. The reason I have someone on my podcast is because they've done something I'm insanely curious about. And I think the worst mistake I made in my podcast was there was a period I would have people on because they were famous. And so I figured, if I have on if I have on Chelsea Handler, I'll up my listeners. But that was just the wrong approach. The best podcast I've ever done, and even the highest downloads, is when people are unknown even, and I just am insanely curious about what they've done and how they've done it. And so I would say they've all been really successful. I'm always blown away by all of these guests. I couldn't really say who was more successful than anybody else.
I got to tell you, my favorite interview of all time is a guy named Kent Cullers. And what he is, do you remember the movie Contact?
Yeah. I remember the book. I never saw the movie.
Okay, the movie. He is the blind astronomer. So what happens is on radio, in audio, he paints the most beautiful pictures because he's never seen what space looks like, but he could describe it in words better than anyone he could ever imagine. So as a guest, he was mind-blowing because he painted the right pictures with his words. Kent Cullers, just if you could hunt him down, he's mind-blowing. He really is.
That sounds interesting.
So guys, we're running out of time. First, James, if we had whipped cream right now, I'd be pouring it all over you. I'm just going to tell you, okay? It would be a whipped cream party.
Men's group.
Yeah, I'm just saying. What could we do to help you? We'll have massive downloads of this. People will watch it. We have a community of doers. How can we help you? What's your ask?
You know, my ask is just to join this group. I don't really hang out with groups of people a lot. This has been so much fun the 2 times I've been on this now, and I know so many people on here already, and I just want to hang out, man. That's what you could do for me.
We'll do idealists. We'll do idealists, and also, yeah, we'll make him a member. You got to go through the same process we all do. That's the thing. And also, James, me and William, who you just met, the guy that hates everyone, but he secretly does love people. We have this issue with California taxes, and we like New York, we're going, maybe there's an alternative. And you moved down to Florida. I mean, that might be a transition when you're in your 70s or 80s or 90s, but not when you're in your 50s. Why Florida?
Well, first off, taxes.
Yeah.
Second, again, the reasons for New York City, I described before, they just don't look. I even own a storefront retail location, like I said, a bar/comedy club, and that's still not compelling enough for me to stay in New York City right now. New York City is just everything I loved about it, and I've been there for a long time. I even look like a New Yorker, and it's just not fun for me. So I'm in Key Biscayne, which is an island. It's a paradise.
Right off of Brickell.
Yeah. And by the way, I came down here sight unseen. I rented a place for a year without seeing the place, without ever being here before, without knowing anybody here. I just did it. And so far, it's only been a couple of weeks, but it seems great. And I'm loving it. And I figured there's no real comedy scene in Miami. So it's kind of fertile ground to create one. And, and
I'm coming down, buddy. I'm coming down. Going to go check it out. William and I are, and let's find a good Cuban sandwich.
Oh, by the way, 60% of Key Biscayne is Cuban, I think. So I'm sure we'll be able to find whatever we need.
Got to find it. People want to find you, hunt you down, listen to your podcast, watch your movie. Where do they go?
The James Altucher Show podcast, and that's really it. I'm happy if you listen, and for many of you, I'm happy if you're guests. And doing a podcast has been an interesting experience because I'm not very social in general. I spend most of my time writing, but I think people in general have not been reading as much, and podcasts have been the consuming item of choice. So I've kind of upped my game on the podcast and reduced the writing a little bit, but I've been really enjoying my podcast lately.
Well, let's talk. Let's exchange some guest ideas. I got some mind blowers for you, okay?
All right.
Let's go back and forth. James, thanks a lot for hanging out with us. We really appreciate it, and I can't wait to get you inside our group. It's an awesome group.
Thank you so much, you guys. Again, I enjoyed it a lot.
Unmute your mic and thank James, everyone.
Thanks, James.
Come on.
Thank you.
Thank you, James.
All right, James.
Appreciate it.
Bye, everyone. Bye, everyone.